This is Mel Grosvenor, and I'm going to talk a little bit about wildflowers today. It's a beautiful spring day. There's all sorts of wonderful blooms, and we're going to take a little stroll in the woods and just see what we see and talk a little bit about how to identify them. So these beautiful white flowers are Ohio's state wildflower. You may know we have a state flower, the carnation, but our state wildflower is this beautiful large flowered trillium. And you see with the trilliums, everything comes in threes. So we have 1, 2, 3 leaves, 1, 2, 3 sepals, and those are the green parts around the flower before it opens up, and 1, 2, 3 petals. Now these beautiful flowers are just blanketing this woodland, and they are absolutely stunning. But we need to be careful about wildflowers, and we really need to enjoy them in their setting. Do not pick them for bouquets to take it home, because they don't last very long at that state. And these flowers have taken 7 years to get to the point where they finally formed a blossom. And it would be a shame for it to finally get to this stage and then have someone pick it up out of the ground, and then it won't last much longer. So this is a beautiful flower. We want to enjoy it right here where it is in the woods. As the trillium ages, it starts to turn a little bit pink, and that will be a lot more of a deeper pink color as it gets older. As you can see, it's not nearly as white as the ones around it. These look like a bunch of green umbrellas. And they're not blooming just yet, but I do want to show them to you. These are May-apples. And if the May-apple only has one umbrella, it is not going to make a flower this year. But if it has two, and you'll see that it makes kind of a letter Y there, in the middle you'll see where the flower is about to form. It will open up into a white flower, and that will eventually turn into a fruit. You don't want to eat this fruit. May apples are edible, but only when they're ripe. If they're not ripe, they're poisonous, so it's best to leave them alone. But they are something that box turtles enjoy eating, and actually when they eat that fruit, it helps to make this more likely that it will spread. The seeds do better after they've gone through the digestive tract of the turtle. So these are May apples. Very cute little plants. This is wild blue phlox. Yeah, not very blue, is it? Very purple, which is my favorite color. I am not sure why it's called wild blue phlox, but it is very charming. This is a trout lily right here, and they come in white or yellow, and the trout lily gets its name because the leaves kind of have spots like a trout. They are also called adder's tongues because the green leaves coming up out of the ground, I guess, look kind of like snake tongues to some people. They are not actually a lily. Another nickname for them is dogtooth violet. They're not really a violet either. It can be a little confusing sometimes with plant names. So like the May-apple that has 2 leaves when it finally forms a flower, trout lilies are like that too. This is one that has flowered, and the flowers are now going to become seed, and it has 2 leaves. But all of the others that you see here are single leaf. And these also take about 7 years to make a flower. So you can kind of judge their age by the size of these leaves. A really tiny one is probably a first-year leaf, and the bigger they are, the older they are, until they finally get to the size where they form a flower, and the leaf is quite a bit larger, and they'll have that second leaf and the flower in the middle. These aren't blooming anymore, but it's a very cool plant, and I really want to talk about it. The leaves are very distinct looking. These are bloodroots. And they do have that name because the root will have a part about the size of my thumb, and if you break that open, red liquid comes out, and it does look like blood. It has been used in the past as a dye for clothing, war paint, various things like that. This is where the flower was, and this will become seeds. And the cool thing about this is when these seeds come out, ants actually plant bloodroot. They like the seeds. There's a meaty part on there that's full of protein, something that they really like, and they will take them to their underground nest, and they will eat the part they like and discard the rest of the seed in their little underground trash spot. And it really doesn't harm the seed at all. The ants get the reward, and that part was expendable, and then it plants more bloodroot, which is pretty cool. It's actually planted by ants. Some other neat things about it, the red juice that I mentioned is actually poisonous. You wouldn't want to eat it, but for a time it was used in some brands of toothpaste. Just a little bit, not enough to really harm you, but it has qualities that are second only to fluoride in cavity prevention, and it was also for a time used in cough medicines. So anyway, it's a very neat plant. It would have had a white flower, very pretty flower, and it is planted by ants. So this one might be a little bit hard to see because the flower is actually green. This is Jack in the pulpit, and that is Jack right there. That's actually a part of the plant called the spadix, and it's covered by this hood, and it's in the arum family. This particular one is kind of young. As they age, they'll get purple stripes where these lighter colored stripes are. So, Jack in the pulpit. This is the first wildflower that I remember learning about when I was a kid from my grandpa. This is Dutchman's breeches. And I always was amused by this little flower just because of how it does look like little poofy pants hanging from a clothesline. Dutchman's breeches is poisonous if you have farmland and you don't want this in your pastures. So I will share a funny story about Dutchman's breeches. Earlier this year, I was taking a photograph of it, and my lovely dog Charlie, who always wants to come to the rescue, didn't realize that when he came to the rescue, I was on a very steep slope. And as I was getting a picture of this plant, he came to the rescue and knocked me on my back, and I started going down the hill backwards on my back, laughing the whole time. And then, of course, he came over and licked my glasses so that I could not see as I was sliding down the hill backwards. Did get a very good picture of him and had a good laugh. So this is, again, Dutchman's breeches. This is squirrel corn. It's a lot like Dutchman's breeches. It has the same kind of leaves. The flowers look a lot like bleeding heart, and that is actually something they are related to. And just like the Dutchman's breeches, this is a poisonous plant, so you wouldn't want this in your farm pasture. You wouldn't want your livestock eating that. These are yellow violets. Violets don't always have to be violet in color. Sometimes they are white or yellow like these, or sometimes white with stripes. And then we have our traditional blue violet, which is funny because to me that's not blue either, that's purple. And the neat thing about violets is they have 5 petals, and there's one that kind of sticks down a little bit lower. It's like a landing pad for bees that pollinate them. And all of the violets around here that I'm looking at have a heart-shaped leaf. So here's our blue violet, has that shape, and so does the yellow violet. They also have these little lines. You can see that better on this yellow one, that are like runway lines pointing the direction for the insects to go in to get the good stuff, to get the nectar. These are spring beauties. Now don't get fooled by the large leaves back behind. Those are a different plant. The spring beauties leaves are very, very small compared to this one. The other one is something called a wild leek, or sometimes known as ramps. The spring beauties have these little lines, as I mentioned in the violets, that are like runway lines kind of pointing into the nectar. And spring beauties actually have a nickname. The fairy spud is their nickname because the tuber underground is very tiny, and it's about the size of maybe the end of my pinky finger, but they are kind of starchy and taste like little potatoes, just the right size for a fairy. So, fairy spuds. And Spring Beauty is one of our earliest wildflowers, so this one's already starting to form seeds. So unfortunately, there are some flowers in these woods that are non-native and invasive that we don't want to have around. And this is one of them. It's called garlic mustard. Now it's called garlic mustard because it kind of has a garlicky smell when you crush the leaves. It was actually brought here as a culinary herb, and it has taken over. And unfortunately, it will crowd out the native wildflowers that we do want. And all the flowers in the mustard family have 4 petals, kind of in a cross like that. So I'm going to have Reese do what we need to do whenever we see a garlic mustard. Pull it out of the ground and get rid of it. Now you can cook with those if you so desired. So, you know, if you have them in your yard, make use of them and get rid of them too. Here is another type of trillium. This one is sessile trillium, also known as toad shade, which I think is a very charming little name. And it's got 3s, just like all trilliums. There's 3 petals, 3 sepals, and 3 leaves. So this is a fun one. It's not in bloom yet. It'll have little white flowers, but it is called bedstraw because the pioneers actually used to stuff their mattresses with it. And it's, maybe you can see, it's got tiny, tiny little gripping parts on the stem there. So it actually sticks to things. It also has a square stem, which is kind of cool. If you twirl it in your fingers, it's actually square. But what I like doing with this one, and its nickname is cleavers, is I like to throw it on the back of someone who's ahead of me, who might not even realize that I've done that. They don't even feel it. And they'll be walking around with that on their back while I kind of laugh about it. Now, if I start that with a group of kids, I always end up with a bunch of it too. But, you know, I don't mind being a part of it. It's a lot of fun. And eventually he might notice that I put that there. Ah! He got me. This one is already kind of going away for the season, but it's one of my favorite ones just because the name is so much fun. This is cutleaf toothwort. It sounds almost like somebody put 4 words in a bag and pulled them all out randomly. But it does have some reasoning. Cutleaf, it kind of looks like the leaves have been cut with scissors. Tooth refers to the root of the plant, kind of resembles a tooth. And wort is an old English word for plant. So it's actually spelled W-O-R-T, not W-A-R-T. So cutleaf toothwort. That's a fun one. See if you can say that 5 times fast. I don't even know if some people can say it 1 time slow. Cutleaf toothwort. I hope you enjoyed our little walk through the woods, and I hope you enjoyed seeing those wildflowers and learning a little bit about them. I hope you get a chance to get out and hike and see some of them yourselves. Here is another type of trillium. This one is called So I will share a funny story about some of this Dutchman's britches. Pastures? You don't want your livestock eating it? Ah, and there goes Charlie. Okay, that works. Oh shoot, I did a video. This one is kind of curious because the flower is actually green. This is a Jack in the pulpit, and right here is Jack in the pulpit. The hood of the plant covers this. Oh,